Hello. I have a very interesting topic today. We're going to be talking about replacement children. Now, I'm not going to get into what that is, but my author guest will. She is the author of Replacement Children, The Unconscious Script. She wrote it along with a psychiatrist, Abigail Brenner. And if you followed my blog at all, you know I'm very focused on the scripts we run that sometimes need a little tweaking. They need editing. They need reprogramming. So, what is a replacement child, Rita?
Well, first of all, replacement child is not literal. It's figurative. And that's an important thing to know. So the reason we use the words replacement child is because it was coined in the 1960s by some psychiatrists who studied a very small group of children who were obviously having a lot of issues because they had been born after the death of a sibling.
Oh.
So that is how it came about. And, you know, I'm not crazy about the term replacement child. The other thing is this covers a lot more than being born after the death of another child, after the loss.
Which I can't imagine anything harder for a parent.
Right.
And all the emotions that are going on during that time and that transference that can occur.
But it can happen also in a loss after a child is born and there's a sibling loss. It also is if it's like a child having to do double duty because there's something going on with a sibling and then the family falls apart. But the other thing that's really important is not every child born after the death of a child is a replacement child or adopted after a child. It depends how it's handled. It's a trauma. It's a special trauma that happens because the parents are so scattered, and it's not blame because the parents really need help too. But it's what happens that other traumas that this trauma brings about other issues for the child. So,
How would you explain what those issues are?
Well, for instance, let me just explain what my story was and how I came about with this because I was born 18 months after the death of a 14-year-old brother who had heart issues.
Oh, boy.
Okay. And, you know, there was always something going on. Like, you know, of course, my parents were in deep grief. And my mother would, you know, she had a very hard time. She was a very good mother. But because of this and because there wasn't help at that time, and that's the thing, we want to make people aware of what's happening. You know, it was always, she made my brother kind of godlike, you know, like a saint. And that happens a lot. And my name is Rita because they wanted to have the R for Robert. And I was always sort of comparing, you know, my mother would say, your brother wouldn't have talked to me like that. Your brother would have brought home A's. Why are you, you know? So I was always kind of competing with a ghost. And I always felt like, what's going on here? But I didn't know. You know, I didn't
you're a
have the
child
words
trying to navigate it.
Right. So what happened is
it's an interesting juxtaposition, a child's emotion versus adult grief and grieving.
Right. Wow. And, you know, babies are programmed to survive. So they pick up what's going on in the household, even though they can't say anything. And if a mother has a loss, lots of times she can't connect to the next kid, you know, if she hasn't really had help. So it sets up a lot of different problems. So what happened is, when one of my children was in school, I went to lunch with some other mothers from the class. And one of the mothers was saying, you know, my daughter is not my first child. My first child had leukemia. And when she was 6 months old, the doctor said, get pregnant, have another child, you're going to lose this one. You know, just go and do it. So, you know, the story, I changed it a little bit in the book because I couldn't find her. But what happened is she had a child 10 days after the first one died.
Oh my gosh.
And she said it was so confusing that there was no help, that she was coming home with a child she didn't know and didn't really want to come home with. She wanted to come home with the other child.
Right.
And, bingo, it started to make sense because she was treating this child. She was always critical. And my mother was quite critical, but not of the second child. There was always something going on. And matter of fact, we had spoken with other mothers, like, is this the same father, or what is going on? And she was saying, it was very hard. She said, I know I'm hard on her. It's just, I guess it's something I have to work on. And I was going, oh my God, this sounds very familiar. So I brought it up. Sometimes when something happens and you bring it up, all of a sudden, all these people.
The law of awareness. Everyone
else.
It
really is. Well, I love the saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I mentioned it to somebody and they go, oh, well, that happened to my cousin. Or this happened to da 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 da. I'm going, what? Is this a thing? So I went to the bookstore and there was nothing on it. And I thought, there's nothing on it. Even when I look in books about grief or, anything, there was nothing. And I thought about it. And every time I would talk to somebody, it was like, oh, yeah, I wish there was something, because that happened. I lost my twin and it was like horrible. And I was always doing double duty. And I said, how come there's nothing on it? It took me years, but after speaking to people and after speaking to my friend Abigail, who's my co-writer, she had never heard of it. She said, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, we have to write this because she's written books. I never went out to write a book. But there's another saying that, I always said, why didn't somebody do something? And then I realized I'm someone. So that's how I got started with this. And then Abigail said, let me explore it. And then she came back like a couple of months later. She said, oh my God, this is a thing. Why do therapists not get this? And she said, you know what happens? You go to a therapist and the therapist wants to know what's happening now. Nobody says what's happening in your family. What was happening when you were born? Because, parents are different for each child depending on what happens.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the other thing that we want to make therapists realize, that lots of times this is the root of the problems. And if you don't get to the root, you're not really going to solve the problem. You're just putting a Band-Aid over a wound. And so that's how this got started. It's also the child who is living with a sibling who has physical, mental, emotional issues. And this can happen later in life. That we have so many stories in the book. The people were just coming out of the woodwork. I was wondering, where am I going to get stories? All these stories are written by the people who lived it, or, I interviewed them, and they were very generous. And it made me really understand my story more, because it was on the job learning. So, and then I met, because of course, when all this was going on, when I was finding out about replacement children with the woman who had lost her daughter, there was no internet. There was nothing that I could look up. I could only go to the bookstore. And then became friends with this woman who wrote her story called Replacement Child. She's a wonderful book. Her name is Judy Mandel, and it's a true story how in the 50s, her parents were living by the airport and a plane fell on their home in Newark, New Jersey, killed her 7-year-old sister and maimed her 2-year-old sister. And Judy was born to replace the 7-year-old. So, it just became, my world became inundated with people calling me through other people who had said, I always wondered about this. I had like this and this and this happen in my family, and I was responsible, and I'm a perfectionist, and I'm like crazy because I feel I have to do everything right. And this so explains everything.
Well, in any family, there are always the dynamics of children. They talk about, the first child, the last child, the middle child, no matter how many there are, you're either middle or beginning or end. And, that is a dynamic within itself.
Absolutely.
And certainly there's always generalizations in the world, but generalizations exist for us to try to form some form of framework. And there's the generalizations of, what are the pressures on that first child, or what that then become their personality versus that last child that's babied and whatever.
Absolutely.
So, and then you add the factor of death of a child, or as you said, a child that maybe didn't die or has got some severe needs or has something that needs to be taken care of. And so much of the parent's attention is towards that child because it just has to be.
And then the other child feels it could go two ways. They have to be the savior of the family.
Yes.
Or they rebel because why is everything going to that child?
They need the attention.
That's it.
So we get attention negatively or positively.
Right. So, I mean, it's been so interesting because each story, of course, it's on the spectrum. And each story is different, but there's so many common denominators. One of the stories that we also did, most of them are present day stories, but we also looked into famous people's stories. And Princess Diana's is one of the, you can follow the dots. I mean, when you read her story, you understand what happened to her. That she was the wrong child when she was born. She was the wrong wife when she married Charles. What happened there is she had two older... First of all, this was an aristocratic family that Diana was born into. And her parents were 18 years apart in age and sort of married because, both of them came from higher up families and that was the thing to do. But they really needed a boy in this family to carry on the name. This was the big deal, okay? So they had two girls. And then they had a son. He lived 10 hours.
Oh, my.
And... it was horrible. And the mother was never allowed to hold him or see him. And of course was in deep grief and was pressured to have another child. So Diana was her fourth pregnancy. And, everybody expected a boy. So when Diana was born, there was huge disappointment. So she was born wrong to begin with. That was the message for her. And to the point where the father sent the mother off to different doctors to find out what's wrong with you. Why can't you have a son?
Oh, my gosh.
And the marriage was rocky to begin with. And Diana, in her biography, talks about, I made things worse for them.
Ugh,
so
what a load of guilt to carry.
What a load of guilt. So when the mother ran off with another man when she was 7, of course, she was blaming herself. But to backtrack, they didn't have a name for her for a week because, who was expecting a girl? Finally, a boy is born to this family 3 years after Diana. His name is Charles. Okay, this follows a whole little thing here. The mother and father are fighting. The mother leaves with another man and is denied really the children. She wanted custody. It was a big thing. And Diana and her brother were much younger than the older two girls who were in boarding school. So they kind of took care of each other. And she said, we used to go to the dead child's grave and talk about how neither of us would have been here if it wasn't for him.
Oh, my goodness.
So, and then she ends up kind of taking care of her brother Charles, who cries at night for the mother. When they go to visit him, when they go to visit the mother, they're on the train together. They take care of each other. So she also felt less than. She always said, her siblings did well in school. She never did. But she was a wonderful pianist, and she wanted to be a ballerina, but she was 5 feet, 10.5 inches. So they said, no, you can teach. She didn't want to teach. She wanted to shine somewhere. And she never could find that sweet spot where she could shine.
You said there were commonalities
Yes.
in people that you uncovered writing this book. What do you think some of those commonalities were?
I think lower self-esteem. But on the plus side, I feel like there was a lot of drive to do things and prove yourself. So many of the people that I interviewed had a tough time, but they were the movers and shakers. It was like, I needed to do something. This wasn't accepted in my family, but what the hell? I'm going to do it. And they did it.
Yeah.
So I met amazing people with amazing stories through this. a lot of them had to learn to get out of certain modes, such as perfectionism. That was a big one. That's not one of my things that I wish I had a little more of it, but perfectionism, that everything had to be done right because the other child was so needy. Okay, if they were still alive, or, or the other child was perfect, or the family was in such grief that somebody had to be the hero. And that was the main thing that I kept seeing over and over again. And also people with a lot of empathy. These were people who were doing social work and psychology and had 20 animals. And, I saw that also, wanting to take care of things in a different way. So it's not all, gloom and doom. It's like, yes, it's hard and it's a trauma, but it's something that needs to be recognized so like teachers and therapists can understand where a child is coming from and get to the root.
Right.
So,
one of the things in any counseling session, I always say you don't have to dwell on it, but let's spend, even if it's 15 minutes, to try to understand, how did you perceive your family dynamic and your role within the family? Right. Because you can be in a very normal household, but you could have, a brother or sister that's, the wild one. So you're going to, that you can tell is frustrating the parents. So you're going to be the peacekeeper.
Right.
Or the other one's getting all that attention because they're getting better grades. So you're going to be that rebel. So I think those family dynamics questions on the most elementary level for anyone.
Right. But a lot of therapists don't do that. A lot of therapists don't go there. And that's what they need to, starting with what was happening in the family when you made your appearance, if you were adopted or, and as I said, not every adopted child or child born into a family like this, if the family needs to be aware, and that's what we try to do. Because, and also even a miscarriage is a significant loss to women and does not get the attention lots of times it deserves. People will say, you're young, you can have another child. Why are you so upset? You have 2 kids already. I mean, that's devastating to somebody. And then they may be very nervous about the next child they have. Like, I lost the pregnancy. What now? Was this child going to be normal?
Right.
So there's a lot of elements to it that I discovered after talking to people and interviewing people. And seeing how needed this is, how just the knowledge, the awareness.
I can see the need on so many different levels. You reminded me of something as you talk about, the different dynamics within the family like that. I remember when I was pregnant for the second time and bursting out in tears in the middle of a big meeting. And I was probably 7 months pregnant and somebody said something. And I remember the only thing I said when they were like, what's wrong? And they said, well, you just made me wonder, am I going to love this second child like I loved my first one? And of course that kid was handed to me and I loved him. You realize how love expands. It doesn't contract.
But the hormones are going.
Exactly. And, but that dynamic of those emotions that get brought into it. What is something that surprised you in your research?
What surprised me was how many people, once you said replacement child and said what it was, said, oh my God, I'm relieved to hear this. It's a community, that there was finally a community. I think it's sort of like ADHD and being on the spectrum for somebody who is not Asperger's, but autistic.
Yes.
Somebody who's dyslexic. Okay, when I was going to school, there was nothing, nobody really even knew those words. Then suddenly, I think it was ADHD was the first one that, it was like, hey, there's this thing. And now there's research. There's people who can help others with it. There's a community of, I'm not alone, I'm not crazy, I'm not lazy, I'm not stupid. There's a community. And that's the whole thing. I feel like a community. Matter of fact, we started, Judy and I and another woman who's a psychoanalyst who's also a replacement child, started Replacement Child Forum. And with just different references and resources, and people could write their stories.
You said you didn't like the word replacement child. What would you change it to if you were going to retitle your book?
I have wanted to retitle my book, and I can't. We put replacement child because you can find it if you're looking in the, the big web out there.
Yeah.
It's sort of like that other child in the family. Maybe name it something like that. I think I would keep replacement child, and instead of, I see it definitely as a script. You're handed something that you're doing differently, unconsciously, because of circumstance. But I think I might put something that it's a matter of circumstance, a matter of circumstance. So people understand, because especially parents get very nose out of joint, like, I didn't replace that child.
Right.
And it's not, you haven't replaced the child. It's just that they're fitting in. Also, if a child is born after the death of another child and people aren't open about it, somebody that is a replacement child that this happened to express this, and I thought this was such a good way of saying it. It's like you're in a book club, and you've been given the second half of the book. Okay, everybody else has the whole book, and you're supposed to make a report on it, and you're supposed to have a backstory.
Oh, that's an interesting...
Your backstory is being made up because you really don't know. So,
That's a very interesting visual. Yeah. I personally, personal opinion, I really dislike the labeling and the grouping that has gone on, especially in the past, like... words get tossed around, or those people are toxic, or this one's narcissist, or, everyone seems to have ADHD now, or they've got some form of something.
Yeah.
And so I'm not a fan of those words, but I certainly understand the value in using a phrase or a concept to find community or commonality.
I know. If you can find another one,
I don't have another one for you. It's just it's an interesting concept, because it's almost like, family dynamics, and death in children.
Right.
That's very clinical. But you could also say, I recently finished a course at University of Toronto on basically how children transfer things during how they develop different dissociative behaviors as a result of divorce. So possibly, whether it's the parent they're assigned to live with, or the one they don't get to live with, and the dynamics that occur, which in a way, that marriage died.
Right.
And now this kid is navigating the adult emotions. Who should they love? Who do they have to take care of? How do they take care of one? They used to love them both. They think they still love them both. How do you get through those different dynamics?
It's a whole trauma.
And it's very similar.
It is.
In a situation like this, because it's still a child trying to navigate adult emotions.
Right.
With their own.
Right.
And finding that merger and where it fits. And in the best of circumstances, any family has dynamics.
Right. Well, the first story in our book was so well written by this gal who, her 8-year-old sister was hit by a car, and the father was the one who said, "Oh, you can play for a few minutes more," and carried that guilt. So when Shelley was born, he tried to make her into the sister. Like, and she was so opposite. Like, the sister loved ballet and she hated ballet. The sister liked classical music. And she said she always was trying. She always felt like she was her and that she was supposed to be her. And she never could. And she said that she became a perfectionist. Any little disappointment, she goes crazy if she's not able to do it. And she said only after we interviewed her did she take this to her therapist and started to work on the root of that.
Well, that's such an interesting disclosure and story because, I've often said to people when somebody will say, well, there's no difference between boys and girls. I'm like, oh my God, you have not had a child
That's right.
and you have not been around boys and girls. I mean, our daughter, could see pink across the airport, whereas somebody else's daughter might love blue.
Right.
Our son never met a Barbie doll that he didn't want to pick up and make a sword, and it's every person's personality. And when you've actually observed children and just kind of let them be, you realize what fascinates one is completely different than what fascinates another. Those personalities, whether you call it nature or nurture, I think they're both incredibly strong. I could never decide which I think is more weighted.
Right.
And if anything, I'd probably say nature, because somebody comes into the world one way and the rest of the people have to figure out how to nurture that or not.
There's a documentary called 3 Identical Strangers.
Oh, about the triplets?
The triplets that were the horrible story because this adoption agency was doing an experiment and took the 3 and gave one to a poor family, one to a middle-class family, and one to another family who was very wealthy.
Oh, my gosh.
And it's a true story, and they find each other by accident. One goes to the university and doesn't go back the next year. And people kept coming up to this other kid saying, hey, we thought you weren't coming back. And he's going, what? This is my first year. And they introduce him to the second one. Okay,
Oh
it
my
goes
viral,
viral, and you need to see this.
Yes.
And a third one says, "Oh my God, I'm
there. I am."
And it's so interesting because they had so much in common, and yet you could see where. So that was very interesting. It's horrible. It's horrible what happened to them. But it's interesting because they had a lot of the same taste and and differences. It's very interesting. It was very interesting.
It's fascinating, those nature things. The other day I was just with my younger brother and I'm looking at him and we're talking and I'm thinking, my gosh, he reminds me so much of my older brother. And they're, a lot of years apart. And our older brother was pretty much out of the house by the time our younger brother. So they didn't spend that much time together. It's not like it's mimicking. It's just that nature of what happens in genetics, the family dynamic, everything else that develops.
Well, you can see this with adopted children
Yes.
too. If they kind of find their bio family. Lots of times there's a feeling of wow, we do the same thing. We have a dog named the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of stories also about adoption. I mean, sometimes it's, just perfectly fine. But the problem lies if they are trying to replace a child or have an idea of, my child would be like this. Why are you like that? Because again, nature versus nature. Yeah.
But even, it's funny when I used to say to everyone, oh, you should have kids. I said that when I was younger. Now I can count the amount of times I've said that to people. I think a lot of people shouldn't have kids.
I agree. I agree.
And that might be the wrong thing to say,
No,
but I
I
really
agree.
do think that, because it is something you've got to accept. I mean, I can remember, just, with our daughter, thinking she's going to wear this because I think it's cute. And, her taking her little plastic scissors and cutting it to pieces because she didn't think it was cute or she thought it needed a little modification, and that just, that's the nature of the beast. It's the same thing. And, our son, same thing. Couldn't get a pair of jeans on that kid. He wanted to wear sweatpants, until he absolutely couldn't wear them anymore, because school had started. But those different dynamics, and you think you're going to control this, and then you realize when that kid arrives, they are so unique. Right. So taking that uniqueness and trying to make them into someone else is painful.
Right. It's what challenges is that child going to have because the parent needs,
Mm-hmm.
the parent's needs come through so strongly, and the child wants to balance it out.
Yeah.
Also for their safety, if they're a baby,
Mm-hmm.
they need to get what they need as a
Yeah.
baby, as an infant. So they will adjust to what the
Mm-hmm.
parent needs.
Yeah.
And that's where the script comes in. That's where the road changes, that the child should be able to be their own person.
Mm-hmm.
And when forced not to be, how do they come back to square one?
Yeah. I mean, I think whether it's in this or other things going on in society right now, we're seeing so much where I just want to grab certain children and just grab them and say, "You're just great exactly the way you are."
I agree with you 100%. And you choose
there
to
is
be...
nothing wrong with you. You are in the right body. You are perfect. This is great how you are. Let's
Right.
just
And
take
you
it from here.
choose who you are. You know who you are.
Yes.
Don't let somebody else get in the way there.
Yeah.
But the problem is, lots of times they don't realize that they're being influenced or having to work a certain way because it's to keep the peace.
Yeah.
This kind of brings it back to, who are you? What do you want? Not what is it that you're doing that somebody else is forcing you to do, or you feel safer doing it that way.
What do you think you learned about family dynamics from interviewing?
Oh,
Hierarchies within family dynamics, the interplay.
it's like I've learned so much from in so many different ways. I feel like most families have something to cope with. It's not like there's a perfect family. But I feel like awareness is missing from so many families in so many different ways, not just this. And, we have a society that is very difficult. I feel like in Denmark and Sweden, they teach children, this is part of the school curriculum, how to be kind, how to have empathy for each other. I feel like American families are kind of on your own. You have an issue, you have a problem. Maybe somebody will get you to a therapist. Maybe somebody will be there for you. We don't have a structure in our society that is really, how do I say it, like more than helpful. It's like where these other countries do.
Well, I personally think that's a large responsibility for parents.
It is.
And, if you choose to have children, it's a responsibility, and a big one, and it lasts your whole life, and it doesn't change.
Right.
And I know, I know my mother was worried about, me at 93 when she died. She was still worried about, any one of us. And so I just think the worry, the concern is omnipresent once you have a child.
Absolutely.
And it's up to that parent to nurture the child as best they can.
But a lot of people don't know how. We should do more with educating kids, even in high school. How to discipline correctly, all right? How to talk to a child. Not, you don't know what their family did or how,
Right.
So there needs to be some structure that really teaches people young, okay, what it is to have a child, okay, that it's a lifelong commitment, and what to do with a child to make it more caring, more comfortable, and secure in themselves. So I really think that we're missing out on in this country. I mean, I feel like high school, lots of it is a waste. The kids are sitting there saying, when the hell? I mean, I couldn't wait. When I get out of here, I'm going to travel. I'm not going to look back. It would be nice for kids to, first of all, know what's out there. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up. I have really no idea. So, but it would be nice to have things that go back to family things, because so many families are fractured and people don't know. I mean, if you've been in a divorced home or a home with a parent missing because they died, or you're in a single family home or whatever, you need to know basic ways of dealing with life and with children that we don't have. So I would have classes in that.
How do you find resolution for that? What do you suggest? What do you suggest to parents let's say while you were working on this book, what would you have said to them if they were trying to find coping mechanisms?
First of all, I would have, say this book is actually for parents, but it's really the target is for
A child.
the individuals who have been in this situation. But I would tell anybody who has had a loss or is having a lot of issues, get a good therapist. There are a lot of really bad therapists out there.
Yeah.
Okay? Get a good therapist and get some support, because that's what you need. You need support from someone who knows what they're doing. If you're having a very hard time, if you've had a horrible loss, you need that. And then, there's no right time to have a baby. I mean, if somebody has a horrible loss and they just have to do, then nobody should say put it off. It's an individual thing. But at that point, they should be also getting help. They should be getting support, and they should be understanding that, yes, grieve this child, but the new child that's coming in, don't put the same expectations on that child.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's important.
Yeah. I think anyone who's a parent would say probably the biggest challenges of parenting, which we all recognize and then adapt, is that each one is different.
Right.
You're different than anyone in your family. You're just like, we're different. Because you marvel and you say, wait a second, we both made that kid. And we both made this kid, but they're
when
different.
Somebody is traumatized and going through a rough time, it's very hard sometimes to be objective and to understand what you're doing and understand what the next step is.
Yes.
And lots of times you need somebody to help you with that next step.
I wholeheartedly agree. Yeah. And I think you make great points about, finding that good therapist, because there are plenty of not good therapists. And the new trends right now in psychology are really frightening to me, that, you're going to pay me and I'm going to share my experience with you. So so you can bond. I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, and this is actually getting written up in psychology today as a regular new column kind of thing. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me.
Right. I don't want to bond with a therapist. I want them to be one step ahead of me and help guide me.
And someone who I'm going to pay to have them tell me their problems. I'm like, oh my God. But it's a real thing now. And there's people who are very publicly saying this is the way to go. Oh. Yeah. Oh. And what do you
heard that one?
Yeah. Big one now. Do you think, would you encourage support kind of groups?
Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah. Well, that's what Replacement Child Forum was too. It was support. And, they could ask us anything. People, we had letters that were, oh my God, thank you. I was so looking for something like this and I didn't even know what to call it, So I feel very proud of that.
From that, because it is fantastic, how do you think that child that was in that, we'll call it the replacement child, how do you think their personality evolves and what they learn to cope with as an adult who now understands a little more of the family dynamic?
Well, first of all, you have to understand that it's a spectrum, that everybody has had very different circumstances. But, there are common denominators of feeling that they have to do more or something else was put upon them, that they're different than their friend next door. So it's so individual. But I think that the biggest takeaway for them would be find the root. Where did this come from? And what did it do to the family? How did it's very complex. But then you start to understand, like, it really made me have much more understanding for my mother and much more sympathy when I realized, like, oh my God, and this is a horrible thing. And then, 18 months after a loss like this, and then you're pregnant and for 9 months of it. And
your hormones are all over the place.
Yeah, all over the place. And then you have like an infant to cope with. And it's a lot. It's a lot. So it's...
Do you have children?
I have.
You do. Did you start to understand your mother more when you had children?
What happened is, when I was pregnant, it was, hope it's a boy, hope it's a boy, hope it's a boy, hope it's a boy. like I didn't realize, like, because I still, didn't have this knowledge. And when it was a boy, then it was okay for me to have the girl.
Oh.
And so I think when my daughter came along, it was a lot, it was fine. The pressure was off. And I'm going, what is this? Is it because of, I don't know. I mean, why is the boy held up like this? We don't have a castle that we have to,
Right.
yeah. So it was really a lot of pressure. But I didn't understand because, I would have happily had 10 girls. It would have been fine. It was like
Yeah.
I wanted a girl. I mean, I wanted one of each, which I got. But, it's
It
like,
is funny when you're pregnant how many people will just walk up to you and randomly say, well, you hope it's a boy or a girl. And I just look at them and say, I'm 40 years old. I'm just hoping it's healthy. And then it was, I'm 44. I hope it's healthy. That's all I'm hoping for. I don't care how it comes out. Just please be healthy.
I know. And, the
Have those
hormones that are...
Are raging.
Yeah. You reminded me of a story when you said, that happened to you when you were pregnant. You started crying. We went to see... I was 8 weeks pregnant, I know, because like by the next week I was throwing up so much I would not have been able to go anywhere. But we went to see Annie, a Broadway show.
Yes.
And we knew somebody in the orchestra, and we knew the whole story that the dog had been, a rescue dog and all of this stuff. Fine. Okay. So we're sitting there, and this is so not like me. And nothing is happening. Really, the dog comes on and Annie comes on. All right. This is in the middle of a Broadway show. I burst into tears. I can't stop crying. And my husband's going, what happened?
I can picture it.
What's wrong? And I knew this was crazy. And I said, that dog, if he hadn't been rescued, he would, and I'm going, this is crazy. And there's so many orphan children, real orphans. And he's looking at me like, and afterward I was laughing about it. I said, well, if you want to divorce me now, please. I understand. But it was like so crazy. And I'm going, I don't know where this is coming from. But I was like, I couldn't stop it. The woman next to me, nothing had happened. This was like,
So relatable. It really is. I mean, I remember our son's name is Steele. And the whole time I was pregnant, and Steele was my husband's grandmother's maiden name, last name. So we removed the E and just made him Steele like heavy metal. But the entire time I was pregnant, I don't dream at all. But I would wake up, or I don't recall a single dream, I should say more correctly. The entire time I was pregnant, I would wake up and say, if this is a boy, we cannot name him Slate. It is so easy to have Slate fracture into tons of pieces. And my good sport husband would look at me and say, Diane, if it's a boy, the name's Steele, not Slate. So,
hormones.
Exactly.
Well, this just getting back to when somebody has a miscarriage.
Yes.
So many people brush it off and they don't realize that also, I mean, first of all, usually you're attached by that time anyway.
Oh, yeah.
And, the hormones are in play big time. So it really hits the nail on the head really hard.
Yeah.
If somebody makes an off comment like, oh, you can have more. You weren't even that pregnant. I mean,
right. All those things people say.
Right.
Did you interview people with that? Where they had a mother that had multiple miscarriages?
I did. We have so many stories in the book, and we have so many other stories that we couldn't put in the book because people were calling. I mean,
I'm sure they really came out. That's why I said even it's not,
We talk about rainbow
aftermath.
Babies, which is a thing now. That they talk about the baby born after the death of another or a miscarriage. And again, that's, it's a group of people who support each other. But the people that we interviewed, a lot of them were so nervous with the next pregnancy that they couldn't enjoy the pregnancy. They said we already lost and and people don't understand. And we had so many horrible remarks. And that came up a lot. A lot of the remarks were more painful than, having to go through the pregnancy again.
Well, it is the challenge of life, what other people say without a filter, without
It is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting to think about that. So
Yeah, well, that's it.
they've gone from replacement children to rainbow children.
Yeah.
That's an interesting transition in phrase. Now, does a rainbow child feel like they are the rainbow after darkness and
I haven't
clouds?
interviewed any of them, but
Mm-hmm.
remember that a child born after the death, a child born or adopted after the death of another, is not a replacement child automatically.
Oh,
That
no, I
that's what
understand
happens.
that this
So,
is
maybe
is
after they're born and the parents can relax a little, they can let that child be.
right.
I did talk to one who said that, and a parent, both of these two different cases, the parents were like, helicopter parents, and the kids, because they were so afraid, like, we've had one horrible experience, and we have PTSD, and this is how it's coming out. So they really need to get that under control.
Yes, and it is important, as you keep pointing out. We're not making generalizations here that this is everyone,
Right, and it's
and we're
definitely not.
and certainly not dualities. Either you are or you're not because of this or that.
Right,
So
right.
that's a very
very
boxed in,
individual.
closed way of thinking. Yeah, it's very individual to the child,
Right.
to the child that could be that child after a death that doesn't even notice anything because that's just not what they notice.
Yeah.
They're just doing their own
Then
thing.
they're not replacement children.
Yeah.
That the parents are able to let them be them,
Yeah.
to be themselves. So, yeah.
What would you say today are the most important factors that someone should consider going forward with this kind of, let's say, research in this area? Because when you started to write this book, you said you really didn't find much research on it.
There was
Or history.
Kane and Kane, who coined replacement child, the word started it. But there really isn't. There really wasn't. And that's why I found these two women, Judy Mandel and Christina Shalinsky, who were replacement children, that we found each other kind of through the internet, and we became friends and then formed this group. And now there's a few other books that are really good that are coming out on it. But it's just, it hasn't been studied like ADHD. It's not something. This is something you have to talk to people, find the common denominators, and go from there. And then what we want to do is just let people understand themselves better, like go to the root. Find a good therapist and say, this is what was happening. This is what I do in my life. I married 10 times. I get in wrong relationships. When you have the root, you can right things that have been wrong. But if you just are covering it with a Band-Aid because you don't know where it started from, you're going to just be like covering wounds and not healing them.
Right.
So that's
quite a closing statement, because it boggles my mind how fast these hours go.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Oh my gosh. Rita, this has been a fascinating conversation. You're a wealth of knowledge and, have also taken your personal experience and tied it into all that knowledge. So you've got the book and the experiential all in one.
Thank you.
Yeah. Really. It was a pleasure speaking with you. I've been speaking with Rita Battat. She's the co-author with Abigail Brennan of a really intriguing book called Replacement Children, The Unconscious Script. And there'll be links to the book below and all kinds of information about this. And I highly recommend you give it a read. It shares a lot of insightful, life-changing information for anybody who wants to take the time to learn a little more about themselves, others, and others they love. Thank you very much, Rita.
Thank you very much.
I'm Dian Griesel. This has been the Silver Disobedience Perception Dynamics podcast. We're recording here in Manhattan Center, TV2. It's a great place. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thanks for joining me.